more of this strange life that we live, the more unavoidable and inescapable our sense of true helplessness becomes, which of course requires a strong sense of honesty with ourselves if we are actually going to arrive at that conclusion. Because if we're really honest with ourselves about the reality of our circumstances and not our biased view of our circumstances or what we secretly wish our circumstances would be, but if we can really be brave enough for one whole minute just to reflect on the details of how our lives have unfolded and are indeed unfolding, we will see that we really have very, very, very little control. An engaged couple has to face an unforeseen future after the man gets into a car accident that leaves him paralyzed. That is a true story. Or a mother learns how to live with grief and battle the injustice after her 2-year-old son simply doesn't come out of a standard appendix operation. That is also a true story. Or a now widow suddenly has to make sense of a world in which her husband took his own life, leaving her to solely raise and provide for her 4 sons. And yes, you guessed it, that too is a true story. Life's surprises can be brutal, and it is terrifying, to say the very least, to find that 9 times out of 10, there will be nothing we can do to change the outcome. But aside from completely flattening us to the floor, this lack of control also leads us into seasons, even entire futures, of resentment, anxiety, and despair. So how can we practically approach this fragile human experience we're all experiencing without risking completely losing our minds? How can we prepare ourselves for tsunamis and deaths and illnesses and divorces that all just have an evil way of creeping in on us when we absolutely expect them the least? So grab yourself a hot drink, or like me, just a big thing of water, and let's begin today's conversation. Hello, my friend, and welcome back, or welcome here for the very first time to the Being Aloud podcast, where we give ourselves permission to talk about the hard things, to talk about the sticky things, to talk about the things that maybe our cultures have not permitted us to talk about openly. And maybe, like today, we permit ourselves the opportunity to talk about things that sometimes are just hard to face. They're realities that we know exist, but we choose to kind of suppress them and push them down because facing them is just a little too difficult. But I have reached a certain point in my life where I've come to the conclusion that avoiding talking about certain difficult things only serves to harm me, and then it comes back to bite me in the butt in the future. Because what I find is that when I don't talk about things that are real and painful and scary, I just end up doing myself a disservice, because what ends up happening is that I go about life feeling extremely unprepared because I avoided the truth and the reality of what it means to be human. And I feel like today's conversation is coming from a place where in my own life, I'm in the heart of a season that just is not ending. I thought it would end. There were signs of like light at the end of the tunnel that just might not be real anymore. And it's just this very prolonged season of uncertainty and pain and confusion and rejection of realities. And it's just not, it's never ending. It's exhausting. It's never ending. And so today's conversation kind of is coming from a place in my heart where It's kind of like me preaching to myself, but it's also me kind of even, yeah, I'm making this video and I'm making this podcast episode for that one person who needs to know that they're not alone. And that is kind of what we do here on the podcast. Anyway, what do we do when we all of a sudden have to come to terms with the reality of life's unpredictability? And I'm not talking about the happy surprises that happen, because those two are there. The surprises of like the perfect weather on a day where we need the weather to be perfect, or the surprises of like our one true love walking into our lives, or these like really warm and fuzzy good surprises that life does bring us. But even though life brings us these like amazing surprises, it has this weird twisted way of also bringing us surprises that we don't always believe we can handle, like sudden loss, whether that's in the form of death or in the form of divorce, or war that breaks out all of a sudden, or a pandemic that strikes planet Earth. There's so many surprises that come that aren't anywhere near as happy or chirpy or warm as the good surprises. And so, of course, we know how to deal with the good surprises. And oftentimes, in fact, I feel like we take those good surprises for granted. We don't even take a moment to stop and thank God, thank the universe, thank life for bringing goodness into our lives in this unexpected way. But it's the harder surprises that we don't always know how to deal with. And the human being, by nature, likes to be in control. We are the only species with a mind that can analytically think and analytically observe and then calculate and draw relationships, very sophisticated relationships between events and outcomes and behaviors and results and things like that. And so by nature, we always were, but I feel like in this modern day and age, we've evolved even more to becoming the kind of people who like to plan futures based on current givens that we know. And how can we plan futures? Sorry, my dog is barking. I don't know if you can hear. But anyway, how can we plan futures if we don't know? How can I say, oh yeah, this year in the month of June, I'm going to travel to Italy, for example, if I don't know for sure that everything will permit me to travel to Italy this June? It's a very... it's like we all know that we don't know, but we like to feel like we are in control, because that way we can make progress. Because if we capitalize on the not knowing, if we capitalize on the fragility and unexpectedness of this life, then we'll just be paralyzed. We will find ourselves, sinking in the quicksand of the present moment, unable to take a single step forward. Because then what's the point of working hard if I don't know if I'll be alive to see the results of what I'm working towards? What is the point of making plans with loved ones if I don't even know if these loved ones are going to be there in the future, etc.? Such a morbid way of thinking. And so we have evolved into, okay, it's like somewhere in our subconscious, we know that we don't know, but that's not what we capitalize on. That's not what we choose to think on or think about. And instead, we pretend that we are in control so that we can make plans, so that we can capitalize on our ambitions, so that we can make something out of our lives. Isn't that normal? I feel like it's completely normal. But what tends to happen then is that even though on a subconscious level we know that we don't know, over time, the risk is that we forget that we don't know. And so what happens when COVID-19 hits? We lose our minds. We have seen so many people, if not we ourselves, like if you yourself have not experienced this firsthand, you definitely know of 1 or 10 people who, because of COVID, how unexpected that was. The fact that now we have had to like completely shift our plans and cancel our plans and circumvent obstacles in order to make other plans happen, etc. So many people have ever since then been struggling with, living with anxiety, frustration. And this anxiety has transformed into like physical illnesses and mental illnesses. And some people are still paralyzed, are still stuck in pandemic times. And that is just one example of life being like, you know what? Here, let me throw you a curveball that you completely did not expect. And let's see what you can do about it. And even if not anything like on a global scale, such as the pandemic, how many of us have experienced loved ones getting diagnosed with illnesses out of the blue? And then now all of a sudden having to imagine very different futures than the ones that they had planned. Now all of a sudden having to cancel plans. Now all of a sudden not being able to imagine futures because of this big interruption that happens in our lives. How many of us have had to hear stories or suffer themselves through the experience of themselves or a loved one getting into a car accident that changes the way that they live their lives, or literally something as random as getting a limb eaten by a shark on another sunny summer day in the sea? It's so unexpected. It's just the reality. But we don't want to face that. And then the downside of that is that when life does throw curveballs, we are not prepared. And so it comes out in the form of like anxiety and stress and all these things that end up happening in our lives. But it's just the reality, right? It's just the reality of life. But another equally important reality of life is that we human beings are above and beyond adaptable. And that I want that to be kind of like the first message of hope that I give today, is that whenever we envision futures that are different than the current days that we're living right now, we tend to like get extremely overwhelmed and we tend to freak out. And that's where, like I said, anxiety and everything comes in. But what we forget also is that we are an extremely adaptable species. And even if you can't imagine living with the change in the future, know that you are such an evolved creature that when placed in the situation, you will find tools that you didn't even know you had in your toolkit to survive and to adapt, and then hopefully even to thrive. And so that is an equally potent and important reality that we need to remember. We are not just living in this weird, absurd life as unequipped beings, but we are an extremely resilient and extremely adaptable species. So hold on to that thought. For today's episode, I kind of wanted to give you guys tips on practically navigating life's surprises. How can we prepare ourselves? Even if, like this episode, you can listen to it or watch it and forget about it. But I believe that everything we learn ends up staying somewhere in our subconscious. English and comparative literature major. Anyway. And then these lessons that we learn end up coming up to the surface whenever we need them. I believe in that from experience. So even if you're not going through that right now, keep watching, keep listening, because eventually this will become a tool, and these will become tools in your arsenal for when you need them. The first tip, the first strategy, so to speak, to navigating life's surprises is you have to make sure that you are investing in good support systems. I have spoken about this so many times on the podcast. it's like uncountable at this point. But the importance of community, the importance of surrounding yourself with a cushion of people who are in your corner, people who understand you, people who understand the way that you think, people who are capable of being selfless when you need them to be, and showing up for you when you need them to show up for you, and sometimes giving you tough love when you don't know you need it, but when they can see that you need it. Community is everything. And so we need to be able to invest in good friendships, in good communities, even before anything completely surprising throws us off guard. Because when you are in the thick of a trauma or a shock or a surprise, one of those surprises, you're not going to have it in you to like start now pouring into friendships and investing into friendships so that they, so that it can be a symbiotic relationship for when you all need help and stuff like that. We need to constantly be living lives that capitalize on good communities and making sure we're surrounded by the good people. So that's the first thing. Make sure you build a strong support system. The second thing, which I'm not very good at all, is planning for flexibility. Now, what does that mean? If we live our lives under extremely rigid, frameworks where my day has to go this way in order for any fruit to come of it, or blah, blah, blah. Like, yani, everything has to go a specific way. If we are rigid in our thinking, then the time will come when life will be like, yeah, your rigidity is just not going to serve you. And what will end up happening is that you're going to crash. So think of work, for example. And that's why I'm so bad at this, because as I've like started taking on new challenges in my like content creation journey, as well as having a full-time job, as well as, all the things that I'm doing, like I feel like I'm juggling so many balls. And what I actually need to do is like batch content so that in the off chance that something happens in the future, everything that I'm working towards doesn't fall off the charts. You know what I mean? Like I don't completely destroy everything I've been trying to work at. So that's just my personal example. And so working or like incorporating flexibility into my schedule looks like batch creating content in advance so that I'm flexible, so that my time is flexible, so that if life happens, it happens and not everything falls apart. So that's just my example. But think of ways that you can incorporate flexibility into your own life. What does that look like? How can you make space for life to happen? What will happen then is that subconsciously you'll be open to life's surprises, because you will have subconsciously planned for surprises, if that makes any sense. And so like on a psychological level, you won't be completely paralyzed when things happen. So that's the second thing, is planning for flexibility. The third thing is stress management techniques. We talk about this all the time on my YouTube channel, on the podcast. It's also not something that's unique to my channel or my podcast. It's something that's very talked about in this day and age, which is, how do we manage our mental health? How can we incorporate systems into our daily routines that set us up for success? So that looks like maybe meditating every moment for 5 to 10 minutes in the morning in silence, and incorporating that into your system so that you can be present, so that the practice of living in the moment doesn't become a foreign concept to you, but that it becomes a practice. Looks like also practice working out, going to the gym, using your body, pushing yourself, pushing your body. We did an episode on the calloused mind, callousing our minds by putting our bodies through difficult things so that when, kind of like as practice for when life gets hard, or when we're mentally in a hard place, or when we're emotionally in a hard place, when we're constantly putting our bodies through pressure, it's like, okay, now we know how to deal with pressure. Now we know how to deal with the extreme difficulty, extreme pain, whether that's emotional or physical or whatever. So make sure you get exercise into your system. Make sure you challenge your bodies in ways that can prepare you, set you up in the future. Another stress management technique could be journaling, which is another thing that we talk a lot about here on the podcast, is journal a lot. That relieves stress. That makes sure that you get all the gunk out of your system, out of your brain, so that you are more present. You can see more clearly whenever you need to see more clearly and be more present. So make sure that you incorporate stress management techniques. And then last but not least is seeking professional help. Make sure that you reach out to a professional. Make sure that you are in constant connection with someone who's a professional who can keep tabs on your life, so that when stuff hits the fan, you don't now need to like get out of your comfort zone from the very beginning in order to, form a connection with someone and stuff like that. I speak about this a lot. Is I've had my therapist since 2018. It is now 2024. And of course, over the course of all these years, it wasn't all bad times. They weren't all catastrophic times. But I have made sure I go see her at least once a month, so that I can keep that in check, so that I can always be seeing a professional for the good times and the bad times. She's like a mirror to me and helps me grow even on normal days. So make sure you also seek professional help. These are ways we can practically navigate or practically set ourselves up for navigating life's surprises whenever they do pop up. But I also wanted to talk about embracing the journey along the way, because we can't be living in this like state of, I don't know what I don't know. I can't plan. I don't know what's going to happen. Now I'm living in constant paralysis because clearly I can't plan, because clearly life, like that's not the purpose of this episode at all. We can also, we need to set ourselves up for when life does give us surprises, but also we can learn to embrace the journey. And that's also a very mindful process, a very mindful journey, like lifelong journey. And so I just wanted to give you tips on how to embrace the journey. Of course, I'm also giving these to myself. First of all is ask yourself if you can find joy in the unknown. So now we know that there's an unknown, that life is unknown, futures are unknown. But can we find joy? Can we approach this unknown with more of a sense of childlike curiosity than with a sense of anxiety and tension? Can we find something much bigger to trust and lean on that allows us to embody curiosity and just be like little children? Like, think of a little child. The little child doesn't plan on what school he or she's going to go to, or, where the next meal is going to come from, or if the parents will will stay together, if they're going to get a divorce. Like, the child doesn't think about these things. The child lives in the current moment, trusts the parents, and just lives with wonder, wide-eyed wonder and curiosity. Can we learn to approach life's complete unknown with a sense of childlike wonder, with a sense of curiosity, so that we can find joy in the unknown instead of apprehension and anxiety? That's the first thing. The second thing is, can we have a growth mindset where, as we're embracing the journey, as we're going about our lives, can we capitalize on the unknowns that have already happened before the next unknowns happen? And can we be like, I was able to take whatever happened in the past, sucky as it was, whatever happened in our past very well could have current implications to this day. Like, if you lost a limb to a shark one day, you're still living without your limb, right? But can you say, I'm able to find the mental strength and mental resilience to say, I can live with a growth mindset where I can grow, I can learn, I can step up because of what happened to me. Not despite what happened to me, but because of what happened to me. If we embrace this growth mindset on a daily basis in our lives, we will know that we have it in us to face the difficulties and to rise above the obstacles. We will know it for a fact. So have a growth mindset. And then the very last thing or like tip that I want to leave you with for embracing this journey is incorporate a gratitude practice. And if you've been following me on Instagram, you know that for the past, like, I don't know how many years, I have had a gratitude practice, although as of late, it's just not been consistently like public on Instagram. But I do have a very important gratitude practice that I hold fast to on a daily basis in my life. And seeing things like just embrace, like, or starting a gratitude practice over time, what it does is that it, you know, like it wires your brain to notice the good things. It's like becomes a new system in your brain almost, that even as you're going about a very mundane, very average, normal day, you will be able to pinpoint moments of like teeny weeny little things that happened that you can be grateful for. And some days those things will be major things that you can be grateful for. But just start a gratitude practice, and that'll help you embrace this journey and take it one day at a time. Take it one tiny magic at a time. And that will be like a stock inside of you in the off chance that life does throw you a curveball and you need to trust that life can be good. Yeah, the gratitude practice will help you a lot with that. Life is very crazy, very insane. I'm learning to accept that I don't have control, and I'm learning to take it just one day at a time. I'm learning to prepare myself for whatever life throws my way. I wanted to close by telling you one tip that one of my friends told me. She was telling me about how she navigates like the absurd unknownness of life. And she said that when days get very overwhelming and when the anxiety is especially difficult to deal with on that day, she pulls out a pen and paper and writes down all the things that are stressing her out. Every single thing, from tiny things to like really big things, from things that she has to do today, for example, and tackle in her to-do list today, to things that are in the future. She writes them all down, and then she goes over the list and marks off all the things that are outside of her control. So if something way in the future is giving her anxiety, like her partner's health or her own health or whatever, she will say, okay, I don't have control over this, so I'm going to check it off my list. I'm going to scribble over it. I'm going to remove it from my list. And I will start worrying only about the things that I can do something about. And that stuck with me. And that's a practice that I've incorporated into my daily life as well. Differentiating between what we can control, what we cannot control, what we can do something about, and what we cannot do anything about. And just letting ourselves off the hook for the things that we can't do anything about. So, yeah, I hope you'll incorporate that into your routine as well. My friend, I am so grateful that you are with me on this weird journey that we're all on. I'm grateful that we get to do this together. I'm grateful that we get to learn together. So please, if you are in support of the Being Allowed podcast, if you are watching me on YouTube specifically, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because I'm trying to grow this community, because I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that we can make a difference, that we can have an impact, that we can challenge our minds in a way that we can then take outside of our own lives and take to the communities around us and be better people for it and lift each other up, even if only virtually for now. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button. Please make sure you like and share. Please leave a review. Please leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of today's episode. What are your thoughts on this topic today? Have you been through something that's thrown you off guard, and how did you come out of it? Let's encourage one another to kind of have this conversation in the comment section below. And I cannot wait to see you again next time.